Hello, welcome to this video, another video in the series of the DNA problem. In this video, the title of the video is Natural Selection Does Not Change DNA. In our previous video, we have seen the things that do change DNA. And in this video, we just want to emphasize this one in the second video. In this particular video, natural selection does not change nucleotides in DNA. In our next video, we'll talk about something else that does not change nucleotides in DNA. Let's start out by looking at a post on the Harvard Edu website, www.harvard.edu, and the specific link is http://sickle.bwh.harvard.edu/malaria_sickle.html. Hopefully you can see that on the video, but that's where this link is taken from. And what follows is a quote from that website. A common misconception is that natural selection somehow produces a desirable change. Giraffes grew long necks in order to reach leaves high in trees. And that's their quote. I'm still quoting them, but they're quoting a sample misconception. And this is not the way in which natural selection works, however. This is not the way in which natural selection works. Natural selection does not promote or produce a change in an organism. Rather, a change occurs because of spontaneous alterations or mutations in the DNA genetic code. Rather, a change occurs because of spontaneous alterations or mutations in the DNA genetic code. Changes in the genetic code can alter the physical characteristics of an organism. If the new trait gives the organism a survival or reproductive advantage over its fellows, the new trait will be represented in the second generation more frequently than it was in the first generation. This is the natural process by which advantageous characteristics are selected. And that, I just want to clarify, is the end of quote. Everything I've shown on the screen since beginning this quote is taken directly from Harvard Edu. So the point being, natural selection does not add, remove, or change even a single nucleotide in the DNA sequence. The best way to understand this is the organisms are the ones that produce or receive the DNA changes or mutations. New organisms are produced that may have random, unrelated, irrelevant, accidental, incidental, or possibly fortuitous changes in their DNA sequence. Natural selection can be understood as a filtering process, or in a sense, a quality control process. Here's a diagram that pulled off from our friends on Wikipedia, and a very good diagram. And I've colored in green what is the organism, and we have a whole cycle here. We could start at the top, DNA zygotes. We mentioned in our first video how in the case of a human, or actually all sexual creatures, there is first one cell that is a fertilized cell beginning, and it divides into 2 cells and 4 cells and so forth. That's the zygote. That will proceed and grow to adult, and each one of these I've put DNA because there's DNA there, and anywhere there's DNA it can be subject to mutations, and we have explained that it would be in the germ cell mutations that would affect the next generation. So the zygote grows to DNA adult, and then if all goes well, that DNA adults become parents, and there they make what are called the gametes, which would be the sperm or the egg. So first of all, they have to find a partner, and then they generate these gametes, and the gametes form. And obviously, in the generating the gametes, and in combining the gametes to make the zygote, in this area here, we could find a lot of the copying errors by or mutations, however you want to call them, mutations or changes by in the process of copying But again, they can occur anywhere in this whole cycle. But that's the green. All these green squares represent organisms. And so that is where the DNA changes can occur. Natural selection filters based on an organism's survivability and reproducibility. That natural selection filters based on that. Natural selection kills, or often kills, organisms with low survivability at any point in their growth before they can reproduce. Going back to our chart here, the chart shows in these yellow squares the effect of selection, and they have it divided up into 6 different types of selection. The first viability selection is this single cell zygote going to be able to grow into the full organism that it's supposed to grow? So there's a viability selection. If it fails at viability selection, it's zapped, it's killed, it ceases to exist. There's not a option B where it would change the DNA. It just zaps it, no longer exists. In the same way, we have the survival selection, which is this zygote going to be able to get to be an adult? And the survival selection really continues. Is it going to be able to survive as an adult long enough to become a parent? And to emphasize, natural selection does not change the DNA sequence. It just eliminates the organism. Natural selection also allows more or less reproduction of an organism based on its reproducibility. The first one of survivability is a either do or die situation. When we talk about reproducibility, it's quantitative. It can be more, it can be less. And going back to our diagram here, we have what's called sexual selection. That's the ability of these adults to actually mate, and I've represented it by a plus minus, meaning, you know, they could mate more or they could mate less. The fecundity selection and the gamete selection is the gametes, and it can be more or less able to generate the gametes, and the gametes are successful in joining together to form a zygote and start the cycle all over again. So here the effect of selection is plus minus. It's quantitative, no longer do or die, but nonetheless, as we say here, for once more for emphasis, natural selection does not change the DNA sequence. Extinct species such as the golden toad, this beautiful golden toad, or the Tasmanian tiger, the fascinating, I could say, Tasmanian tiger, are proof that natural selection in no way modifies DNA sequence to meet the survivability or reproducibility requirements. If the random, unrelated, irrelevant, accidental, incidental, or possibly fortuitous changes in an organism's DNA sequence do not make it, first of all, survivable, and second of all, reproducible, at some level, it will disappear. Very simple concept that we wanted to cover today, but even as the people at Harvard Edu have pointed out, a common misconception is that natural selection changes DNA. And I believe with this short video, we've shown that natural selection does not actually change DNA sequence. We have a webpage, www.thednaproblem.com. If you would like to contact us via email, then you can send an email to thednaproblem@gmail.com. Thank you for looking at this video, and we'll go on in the next video. We will talk about the environment does not change DNA. Enjoyed sharing this with you.